nervous?
No.
Where's your answer?
Dennis Beckham, let the ball on! Dennis Beckham! Dennis Beckham! Dennis Beckham! Dennis Beckham! Oh!
Oh, no! Oh, yes! He missed it!
Welcome to the Suffering from Joy podcast. We have a special episode today. We're debating WolffIn, WolffOut, Wolf-a-Burger versus WolffIn and Out, however you want to phrase it. There are a lot of things going on here, but the long and short of it is Austin fans aren't too happy with Josh Wolff. Should he stick around? Should he not? And joining me today on the podcast are Charles Peacock from the False Nine. Say hi, Charles.
Thanks for having me. Hello.
And Seth, who knows everything. Seth, say hi to the nice people.
Hey there.
Okay, so it's a complicated issue, and I think the way we should do this is kind of to state our positions and our biases up front. This is supposed to be a friendly debate where we kind of actually lay out the positions of each side, because really there's a lot of like invective and straw manning and a bunch of bullshit on each side. So I'll go first. I'm going to moderate, and I'm sort of reluctantly what I would call WolffOut. I've said it on the podcast a few times, but I'm sort of in the you can't fire everyone, so you have to fire the coach camp of WolffOut. It's not 100% like Josh Wolff is the worst coach in the history of the sport or anything like that, but that's where I'm coming from. I'm going to do my best to be neutral on this, but I will kind of ask pointed questions to both Charles and Seth throughout, so hopefully I don't, narrow too much on one of them, but we'll see what goes on. Charles, where are you sitting right now?
I am in the WolffOut position.
How WolffOut are you?
He shouldn't have been allowed back on the team plane on Saturday. WolffOut.
Okay, that's a pretty good answer. So Seth, you're going to be doing the WolffIn position, and are you WolffIn, WolffOut, Wolff maybe?
I am WolffIn for today, but Wolff out as sporting director ASAP, and possibly WolffOut if you lose back-to-back Copa Tejas games at home, but WolffIn as an organizational leader.
Okay, yeah, and I think we'll get into the details there. But just so we have that all done up front, are you guys ready to rock and roll and get to the fun stuff?
Sure.
All right.
Yeah.
In the blue corner, Charles Peacock of the False Nine arguing WolffOut. Ah! In the red corner, Seth, who knows everything, arguing WolffIn. Bow to each other like this is an Aikido match. And let's go. Charles, opening statement, WolffOut, why?
In the 2.5 years where Josh Wolff has been coach of this team, we have not only not progressed, we've regressed. Greg Berhalter said that, the playoffs are slipping away from Austin. There's a trophy at stake on Saturday, and they have a chance to climb 5 points clear in Copa Tejas standings. That applies to this season. He said that in 2021.
Did you say Greg Berhalter or Josh Wolff?
Greg Berhalter.
Oh, wow. Okay, just wanted to be clear.
Yeah, it appears in Phil West's strike article.
Okay. Anything you want to add for your opening statement?
Yeah, even not looking at the results, Austin plays ugly, dated soccer that is never going to lead to any kind of consistent success in this league.
Okay, that's a pretty strong statement. Seth?
We have to look at what we have to work with here. This team, first of all, made the Western Conference Finals in its second season. Well, we might be recording this on Tuesday night while we're watching the Golden Knights possibly win a Stanley Cup tonight. That's even year 6 for them. Getting to a point, yes, they made a Stanley Cup in their first year. And yes, there have been teams at MLS that have been successful very early on. But making to a Western Conference Final that early on is nothing to laugh our heads off at. It. Last year, we were in euphoria land. And sports are something that, especially, this is a podcast called Suffering from Joy. There has to be suffering involved to get to points of joy here. And it's not just going to be a unilateral climb up towards the top. And what Josh Wolff and crew have done is that they have building out an organization where a U15 team is winning a Generation Adidas Cup here. You have a U17 team that is competitive. You have a next pro team that is second place in the West right now that is plagued with a clear sense of identity. Do we have the perfect players for this system? No. Are the results this season so far acceptable? No. But just because like we're halfway through a season, we're just going to be like a Liga MX team and go fire our coach for the sake of firing a coach without a clear replacement. I'm not there yet on WolffOut.
All right. Charles, I think that's pretty strong opening statements from Seth. What do we do? Are we just firing Wolff to fire Wolff, or do we have a backup plan in mind?
I don't think it's right to look at this as what has Josh Wolff done this half of the season. We have 2.5 years of evidence of what Josh Wolff is as a coach. He's coached 93 matches for Austin and has only won 31 total matches. 14 of those came in the first half of last season. We basically saw 20 games at the beginning of 2022, which included a loss to a USL side, mind you, where Austin racked up all the points they were going to get, and has really been the only time we've consistently seen them play good soccer. The worry about keeping Wolff is that through the last 2 years, where Austin has been in the standings through match 17 was last Saturday, is where they finished. And so if we're looking at being a playoff team or trying to improve and trying to get in there, based on past experience, Josh Wolff isn't the coach who's going to be able to do that. I think there's a ready replacement there. And I think if we're going to get into the nuance a little bit about Josh's job, he is also interim sporting director. A lot of conjecture has been said about hiring a new sporting director. That person, whoever that is, should be allowed to hire the new coach, or else we're going to end up in the same situation we're in now, where the coach was hired before the sporting director, and it's clearly not working.
Some pretty compelling points there. Seth, you kind of mentioned that a lot of people are upset about the results this year, but I think Charles makes some good points that these go back to last year. We had some great results in the beginning of last year and a nice little playoff run, but where do you sit on kind of the body of work of Josh Wolff? And I think we're all willing to forgive kind of the first season a little bit. So let's say the past year and a half or total body of work.
I mean, it's also looking at it, it's the coach doesn't play the game. The coach chooses who is in the starting lineup, can choose the formation, but I think all three of us would agree that if Ruben Gabrielson, if the American healthcare and education systems worked in the way of a European country, we still had Ruben Gabrielson on this team, that this team would be better than, I wouldn't say necessarily than last year, but would be better than its current form, and that has absolutely nothing to do with Josh Wolff as a head coach.
Okay, but
so you
fine. Go ahead.
But my point is, I made in my initial statement, I am not a fan of the way of extending Cascante, giving him a longer contract at this point, giving even the deal that we gave Driussi. I mean, Driussi has not looked good this year since giving him the deal. Diego has not looked good since getting a contract extension. It looks like we've had a culture of where the guys are getting the bag from a sporting director and they're not putting forth the same effort as they did last year. And even in the games that were in the second half of the season, there was still no doubt that they were putting forth their best effort. And obviously we've had injuries and we've had other things. We have to recognize that reality as well. But it's looking, in my mind, it has been less of a managerial shortfalling as it has been a team design shortfalling. And I mean, maybe losing Claudio Reyna mattered a lot more. I mean, I'm not defending Claudio as a person. Claudio needed to go, and that is, I am perfectly at peace with that decision. But not having a plan B, it falls more on the front office there. And Josh Wolff is still a first-time head coach here, and I think he deserves a chance to be focused on just being a head coach rather than being a head coach and a sporting director. I think all three of us agree on the fact that like him as a sporting director probably doesn't make sense in this given moment.
No,
I agree.
Go ahead.
I'm just generally of the view that the coach should only be coaching, and that trying to do more than one job is too much for any person.
Yeah, I agree. And just a brief programming note: we'll have some Cecilia-related content a little later this week, but or not Cecilia, different guy, Claudio. Okay, so I mean, we kind of all agree that Josh shouldn't be doing this whether you want to call it interim or whatever sporting director role. Seth, can you fire him from that and actually keep him on as head coach? How do you semi-demote someone like that?
But I think it's the key is an interim there. I mean, we all have, I don't know, in my professional life, I've been an interim of a bunch of roles, and you're an interim for a few months, and then you find someone for that real job. And then usually you have a nice drink and you're relieved that you're no longer in that role too, because you have enough to focus on in your day job. And Josh has plenty to focus on in his day job. And I think all three of our frustrations in this as being super nerds of this stuff is we have no idea how much they're making. Did Josh get an additional? Oh, he makes an additional $250,000 now that he's interim chief soccer officer. I have no idea. And it's weird to me that we have no clue how that works, but thus is the single entity structure of MLS. But I think at a certain point, it's okay, I've coached 17 games this year. We have 19 points. That's not where we want to be. We need to have probably 43 to 44 points to make the playoffs. His job should be figuring out how can we get those points to make the playoffs, starting off with 2 matches against in-state rivals at home next week. And that should be the only thing he's focused on, not a transfer window that's opening up in 3 weeks.
Charles, would you be happy if Josh Wolff is relieved of his interim chief soccer or transfer guy duties and only remains and solely focused as the head coach?
I don't. Are you talking about in the short term for this season or as a long term plan?
Yes.
Long term, no. I think unless the sporting director who gets brought in wants to keep him on, at which point I have to begrudgingly be like, "That's your choice. It's probably wrong, but that's your choice." In the short term, I think it's easier for the sporting director to take hold of the team and do whatever they want with the team without the previous regime left over there. And I would even include Chris Rubio in that.
Sean Rubio.
I'm sorry. Too many teams.
Yeah. Sean Rubio. I mean, Seth, how do you square that circle? If we're going to drop Josh off of this transfer decision structure, we have a window opening up. I think we all agree the roster needs some work. Are we just going to tread water here? What's going to happen?
No, I mean, I think you say that, hey, Sean Rubio is your person for this to get out this year at this point. It is – I don't see a world where it makes sense to fully relieve him of everything if you don't think Sean Rubio is at least ready to be the person for the rest of this year. If we get to a point where we finish 11th or 12th this season and we want to go Wolff out at the end of the season and go Rubio out and go everyone else out and start a FC Cincinnati style rebuild, I'm okay with that. But I think right now with this structure in MLS, the fact that we are close enough to the playoff line, and unless there is a player revolt, and I think I've been pretty consistent on this point, if we have a Bernadeschi style incident where we see any of our team leaders speaking out against Wolff publicly, I'm fine going to Wolff out as manager on the spot there. But I don't think he's lost the locker room yet. And I think at this point is if he could figure out ways to inspire them, build off of what we can with some opportunities ahead here. I mean, and take it one match at a time and start getting some 3 points here. This team is a point or two out of a playoff spot right now. It is still very much competitive, even if the form in the last few matches hasn't been exactly inspiring.
Yeah, I mean, Seth brings up a good point here. We're, a short run or a couple wins away from, being in a good spot for a playoff spot. Is that really that bad?
In a league where 9 of 14 teams make the playoffs, yeah, or in a conference rather. But I think part of it is that I've seen no evidence in the last, at least through this season, even dating back to a lot of last season, that through 31 games they've only scored 31 goals. This is no longer a trend. This is what the team is. They don't score enough. They don't defend well enough. I'm not sure how Austin is going to suddenly turn into a different team. Because we're also so limited in terms of roster construction, in terms of adding players and dropping players, that these are kind of the guys. And, watching the match on Saturday and watching other matches, the vibes are bad, aggressively bad. And I agree with Seth that barring a player revolt, I'm not sure Josh is going to get fired. I think the only 2 people who can fire him are Anthony Precourt and Sebastian Driussi. And neither of them seem willing to do that at the moment.
No, I mean, they don't. I think we're kind of in a different debate here. We're discussing what should happen, not what will happen. Seth, I'm going to read you a couple of comments because I thought they were hilarious. So Austin FC haven't scored more than 2 goals in a match in an entire human gestation period. I can prove this. Reader, listener, Callie says, yep, I was 2 weeks pregnant at the RSL game where the last time that happened was, and she's currently feeding a 1-month-old. What makes you think Josh Wolff is going to fix this if we have that track record?
What makes me think that? Sorry there. At a certain point, I mean, Moussa Jite had scored, 2 goals in his Austin FC career and had a hat trick in about 20 minutes in a game last year.
Yeah, he was a sub in that game,
What's
right?
that?
He was a sub in that game.
Yeah, he was a sub in that game and scored, and came in and scored a hat trick. Like, it is you get onto a moment. I don't think any of us thought we were going to go score 4 goals against LAFC at home last year, and that happened. Like, soccer is not about logic a lot of the time. Like, at a certain point, you can get the right mood, right things that happen here. I mean, I am a logical, data-driven, rational person, but like sometimes things happen in this sport. And you're just like, what on earth is this? Like, what was Lucas Zellarayad's XG for the goal that he scored up here on Saturday night behind the line? It was probably, 0.001, but it went in, and he won the game. Like, at a certain point, goals come out of weird places, and, like, I mean, if Driussi hits that sitter to be the second goal there, we might have walked out of KC with a point, even though we didn't deserve it on Saturday. Like, past performance it can be helpful in predicting the future, but it's not necessarily indicative of it. And streaks and momentum are a weird thing in this game, and they can come in any place there. And as you start regressing to the mean, last year we overperformed on our XG. This year we're underperforming on it. At a certain point, there's a revision to the mean, and yeah, that might mean 4 or 5 goals in a match somewhere.
I mean, Charles, do you have any response to that line of argument?
I mean, I agree in the sense that, like, you know, we are still playing a game with humans, and humans are fallible and anything can happen. At some point, like, I understand the idea that we're regressing to the mean, but part of the problem is also that Austin isn't creating as many chances as they did. You know, their XG is down a third from what it was last season. So even if you're part of it is that to overperform on your chances, you still have to create chances, and they've not been good at that.
No, there's no denying that we haven't been as good as we need to be at creating chances. We also haven't had as healthy of a roster. We haven't made all of the tactical adjustments that we need to make. And some of that is a managerial decision, but some of that is a sporting director decision.
Yeah, Charles, I want to hear your opinion on the injury crisis, the groin demons, all of that going on. How much do you think that's affecting the performance versus, say, like Wolff's influence on the team?
I think it's affected it in the sense that, you know, I think we've only really had like 11 minutes this season of the preferred, quote unquote, preferred starting 11.
And what 11 minutes they were.
Exactly. You know, it was great against St. Louis City for a while there. I think part of it is that this season has had really bad vibes from December, January with Reyna. It's continued on through the season because everybody hasn't been healthy at once. It's always been staggered. That's why Ring has been having to play so much, and why he finally got struck by the groin demon. And so I understand that, you know, injuries are a problem, but they're also a problem for every team. You know, every team has had some important players be out, and they don't all just seem to completely fall apart the way Austin did. And some of that is on roster.
The LA Galaxy would like to disagree there, but.
Well, I mean, if we want to talk about teams that have bad vibes and have had bad vibes all season as an example of why you need to fix things, the LA Galaxy are number one. But and that's also that is also a coaching decision now. You know, Josh went to playing at a 5 at the back system with 3 center backs on a team that couldn't competently keep 3 center backs healthy, and continued to play people out of position that we saw didn't work. And only recently has he relented back to last year's system, the more traditional like 4-3-3 kind of Dutch system that he preferred in the first 2 seasons. Not that it's working that much better. And then we get news that Radovanovic might be leaving. And so you kind of look at the roster construction and the tactics that Wolff wants to play, and they don't mesh in any way. And for somebody who also has the title of sporting director, that's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, Seth, do we need to give Josh a little transfer time to fix this? Wait for everybody to get healthy?
I mean, I think it's a question of, okay, if Radovanovic is leaving, you still have a buyout to use. You have Amro Tarek taking up a 20-person spot right now on this team, who isn't even, I mean, has he even been at practice? Like, I don't even know what's going on there. Like, some of that has been, like, I just don't know where this falls under. That there's just been some very poor spots being used. And if Radovanovic is leaving, we need to have at least one center back. I mean, Kippy isn't even the best center back on Efecito right now. Like, we have to get to a point where we have guys that we can trust, whether it's 2 center backs or 3 center backs. I think it is, if you have 20 senior roster spots and 10 other spots, you have to have 4 center backs that you can trust. We're not going to have the total fixture congestion. And one thing we haven't really talked about is just like playing in a lot of competitions is hard, but we somehow only played 3 extra games in all these competitions. So I don't really want to use that as an excuse, but I think that we got galaxy brained on some of that stuff and got to our heads and tried to focus on everything. So we ended up focusing on nothing.
Yeah, Charles, you kind of mentioned, and Seth sort of was talking about this just now, that the vibes have been off all year. And, you know, that's any number of factors. You mentioned Claudio, that's even before the year started. Do you think our perception of this is colored by how good the vibes are at St. Louis City right now?
Yes, I think they're more clouded by how good the vibes were in Q2 last season.
Yes.
You know, from especially from seeing you know what happened with Claudio and I think the worrying thing about this season is that the team faced adversity last year with what happened with Cecilio. And, you know, really worked through it and moved through it, even not getting anything out of that spot. And this year we haven't seen that same kind of fight or aggression. I'd also be remiss, just, you know, this is something we keep track of over here at the compound. You know, Josh keeps wearing black, and the team
he wore Verde on Saturday.
He did, but then he wore a black pullover over it. Like, he was like shamed of wearing Verde. So I think at some point, like, you know, the vibes being off, like, from the front office and in the locker room just kind of affects everything.
Okay, but does firing Josh fix that? I guess this is sort of the argument that I think people are on kind of different sides of, and I want you to explain essentially the WolffOut version of this. Does firing Josh Wolff, you know, fix everything? Does it fix some things? What does it fix? What's the play here? Why do we fire him?
I think short term, there's only so many things that you can fix quickly and easily. You can't change over 15 to 20 players in a transfer window. That's not doable. That's not feasible. You can't change the coach. You can try to change the vibes and try to go to somebody like Davy Arno, who, you know, we talked about the Musajite hat-trick game. He was the one who's been credited with making that argument to substitute him in and to change how Austin played for that match. So short term, there's not a whole lot of options just because of how MLS works and the rosters, and getting rid of Wolff is both the easiest, and it could at least solve one problem, which is a coach playing a system that the roster doesn't necessitate playing. Long term, there's a lot of fixes, and the number one thing is getting a clear idea of the front office decision making and making sure that they have a clear idea of not only what their roster needs to look like, but what they want to play, and try to maintain what is going on positively, especially at the youth levels, to try to have that infiltrate the first team.
Yeah, Seth, so we're recording this Tuesday night. The Vegas Golden Knights are up 2-0. Looks like they're about to walk into a Stanley Cup win at home for the first time in their franchise history. There's a lot of joy going on there. And what makes you think Wolff versus, let's say, a Davy Arnaud is going to bring that feeling back to Q2?
I think, honestly, a lot of the divisions are, if you look at, it was interesting. I had a call with the front office in my away travel role a few weeks ago that was telling me that the front office was reading case studies from both MLS, from other sports, and other businesses, of businesses that have had struggles in their third year, after the team started struggling.
Yep.
And they're trying to figure out, like, they're looking at this from, like, they've brought in some UT professors, they've brought in some other people to help them actually study this, which I found to be really interesting that they're actually looking at this from a management point of view. But it's also that people leave opportunities that, like, even among supporter groups, there's been a lot more internal bickering. There's been other things that, like, winning glosses over a lot of things, and it's really easy to start being discontent when things aren't as good. And the highs last year were not like amazingly high, but like they were so much higher than year one that we get to the point where it is where it's like, okay, we've set ourselves up for expectations, and you have to remember what is the bar of expectations. And I think an example that's really useful to me, as some listeners of the podcast know, I'm a big SC Freiburg fan and a member of the club in Germany. And we've had our manager, Christian Streich, for 12 years now. Year one, finished, barely survived relegation. Year two, made the Europa League. Great season. Year three, finished 14th in the league. Most teams, after you'd finish 14th out of 18th, you'd probably sack your manager. Freiburg, nope, they didn't sack the manager. They end up getting relegated the next season. They didn't sack the manager then. He comes up, wins the second league, and has now gotten the team to finish in the Europa League each of the last 2 years, and has built up the best academy in Germany that actually would have gotten promoted to the second Bundesliga if they were legally allowed this past season. It's a long-term project. Austin fans don't have the patience of German fans of an entirely club-owned team because Christian Streich is an incredibly charismatic person who is politically aligned. Honestly, like if Josh Wolff had 20% of the charisma of Christian Streich and was as vocal on political issues, I think a lot of fans would put up with mediocre results. But Josh Wolff is such a, I mean, I don't know if he's a good or bad person, but he's just such a meh person that I think a lot of the most vocal supporters within our team are like, this is the guy I'm going to go fight for. Like, he puts up weak excuses in press conferences. His Spanish isn't that great. He doesn't show emotion on the side. He's not necessarily your rally around the flag leader. I think people would be more okay with not as great results if you saw someone to be like, you know what, he at least gives a shit. And I think the fact that there hasn't been as much of that from Josh makes the WolffOut contingent so much more loud and vocal and gives them a valid point.
Well, and I mean, I'm going to tie this into a listener question here in a second, but like, it's not meh. And I don't think Josh is a bad person. Like I said, we're going to do some Claudio and Cecilio stuff later this week. Josh is not in that category. Let's state that unequivocally. Like, you know, Josh may not be like, you know, the life of the party or something, but he's not anywhere like that. So let's state that out. But Charles, I'll go to you and I'll read this from Rachel Rue. For the WolffOut crowd, if he was a more animated coach, which is kind of what Seth was talking about, who showed frustration, emotion, would that impact your feelings? If he did make kind of like, if he was, you know, more animated on the sideline, or if he tried new things and the record was the same, would you still feel the same, like he's got to go mid-season?
I don't know. To shortly answer the question, the long answer to the question is that I don't rate how animated a coach is as being good or bad. I think every coach can coach in their own way. I don't appreciate Josh's complete coach speak at every press conference to where it doesn't seem like they're different. Like you almost have a weird like deja vu sense that he answers every question the same. So that I generally have a problem with. I wish he was slightly more blunt, more honest. I wish he took more responsibility. You know, comparing him in the press conference to Gallagher at the press conference on Saturday. You know, Gallagher had a lot of, you know, he had a lot of taking accountability as not just him, but the team and how they played. And we never really hear that from Josh. Josh always kind of resorts back to the like, oh, we played well for a while and we had some good moments. And then it just kind of got away from us. And he says that every press conference. So at some point you just kind of stop believing that it's true. But I mean, Josh is a reserved guy by every account. Even, you know, meeting him in person, he seems that way. I think that is a personality type that can still win and be a good coach. So I don't think him just like ranting and raving like he's Jurgen Klopp is a problem.
No, and I do remember a time, like I know there were WolffOut people in the first season, but quite frankly, I think that was beyond ridiculous. I don't remember which game it was, but our guys were getting like hammered left and right, and the refereeing was terrible. And I just remember thinking like, man, can you get like a yellow card or something? Like just to fire the team up. Like, we're not going to win this game. We're not going to make the playoffs, but like go do something. So, I mean, I think there's a little bit to that question.
I assume that match was against San Jose, just because every San Jose match.
It's a good assumption.
I mean, that was the one press conference where he finally broke form, where he called it out on a clown question towards him. So, like, I at least appreciated that someone finally got under his skin there, which I don't think has happened this year.
No, I mean, that's a double-edged sword, right? Like,
Yes.
we want him to show more emotion, but if, he's going off on a bunch of stuff that doesn't matter, like, we're going to be like, what the fuck, dude?
Yeah.
Oh wait, do you mean the Eric Goodman bullshit question?
Oh yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I'm getting my references mixed up there. You're right. That was Eric. I got to give him credit for that. Yes. On Zoom press conferences, which are still a thing, which is crazy to me that Zoom press conferences are still a thing in June 2023. But I digress.
That's a conversation for a different day. Seth, she has a separate question, Ray Charu, for the WolffIn crowd. Round 1 of the playoffs is now series-based. How do you justify hanging on to a coach that hasn't shown he can make adjustments, when in a series format that tends to win out? Being objectively better doesn't matter if you've got a bad matchup. Looking back, do you think we could take RSL in a 3-game series? And we made the point on this podcast several times, including you, that we're looking at the end of last season very differently if Rubio Rubin doesn't get an incredibly stupid second yellow card. So what do you think about our chances with a Wolf first-round playoff series?
Well, you got to win a play-in game to get to even a first-round series with the way this season's going. But yes,
you're not helping your case.
I'm just being a realist here. No, I think it's going to be interesting there. Do you make adjustments? I mean, we saw honestly, I don't think most coaches in this league are good at making adjustments. Steve Cherundolo tried to make a bunch of adjustments in the CCL final for LAFC and went to a back five, and it failed miserably against Leon. So it's a question of, okay, who's going to come up there? I don't think Josh. I'm not defending because I mean my position's been very clear. I think his lack of adjustments have not been great. But then again, he's not coaching against the world's greatest geniuses here. And I think that at a certain point, I would put our home field advantage in a must-win match above almost any in the league. And I think you have to hope that for at least, even if you're on the road for at least one or two of those matches, you got to go take advantage of it. You got to go create opportunities. And he did a good enough job that first half against Frisco last year was the best half of football that I've seen this team play, period. I'd say even better than either of the LAFC games. Yeah. Just coming out in that environment, especially against a team that hadn't beaten before, to come out and be as dominant. I mean, second half was not good in that match, but it is possible under him. We have seen moments of it. We know it is possible. It's not like we're asking for the truly impossible here. We know it can be done. And I think that's what makes it frustrating it's okay, there is hope here. These moments can click. What do we have to do to rebuild those moments to see what is possible?
I mean, Charles, let's piggyback off of what Seth just said. Is there hope here?
I mean, there's always hope, but it's the hope that kills.
Yeah. Answer the question.
No, I agree. There's hope. I as much as I am a naysayer about this, I also acknowledge that if Austin can keep everybody healthy for the stretch run from Leagues Cup on, figure out what they're doing with GT's spot on the roster or make another savvy roster move, they could absolutely get enough points to get into the playoffs and be a team that, other teams may not want to face. There's absolutely hope for that. I don't want to say that there's no hope, because there is. There's only no hope when you're mathematically eliminated from the playoffs.
I mean, Seth, is making the playoffs good enough?
Making the playoffs good enough for this year, I would say making it to at least the first round. If we were to lose in the playoff round, I would be fine with a cleaning of the top house there. If we make it to at least the first round of the playoffs and are at least if we lose 9-0 on aggregate or something, then no, you're out. But if we lose in the first round of the playoffs and are competitive, and we see signs of progress in the second half of the season, I'm good with season 4.
Okay. Let me kind of rephrase this. I'm trying to go back to our well of listener/reader questions here. This is from noted WolffOut enthusiast Aries. Um, so I'm going to kind of summarize it, but there seems to be a narrative that WolffOut people are just not patient enough, and good things will come if we just wait for the system to work. Wolf's already been asked what he would change in the second half of the season, and he basically said nothing's really changing since he sees a lot of good things. And I think that's not an unfair statement, not to editorialize too much here, but is there something concrete that the people that support Wolff can point to that's happened this season that should give them more hope?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, Owen Wolff has been gone for, I mean, yes, he got in a little bit there against KC, but has been gone for the last month. And
the game was over by that point. That doesn't count.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like it's not. It does. Like we were getting our ass kicked. There's nothing around there. Like establishing because of injuries and other things, we haven't been able to have a consistent. I mean, have we repeated a starting 11 in more than 2 matches this year?
I would be surprised because we've been rotating a lot.
Yeah, I mean, and if you look at our schedule coming up here, I mean, I'm personally fine with tanking Leagues Cup. I mean, yes, it'd be kind of cool to get around a 16 match with Messi and Inter Miami if that were to happen, and the club would make a lot of money on that. And it would be good for a lot of other things. But it is, I'm fine with tanking Leagues Cup and taking a couple weeks off to just relax, get focused on a stretch run here. I mean, if the team gets into a Leagues Cup run, I'm all for it. Go for it. But if we end up finishing second in the group, take the Efecito guys out to LAFC and go lose 5-0.
It'll be an experience, right? Just a learning experience, or is it prepping them for their future as Austin FC players?
It is I think it's a bit of both. You get to a world where you want to have guys that play in big matches and get to a point where it's okay, if you know that you're not necessarily why put yourself through something where, okay, if you know your odds of succeeding are so low, and a world of okay, what do we actually gain out of this besides some money and a CCL spot so we could go lose to we can't lose to a Haitian team next year because they're ineligible, but go lose to a Nicaraguan team or something. But it is right now, the fan base cares most about making a playoffs and making a run there. You should be doing everything you can to set up the current guys and possible guys who can fill in for big matches moving forward there. And I think that's what you do. And if you look at it, we don't have that many Wednesday matches coming up here. I mean, you have the 21st, you have July 12th in Vancouver, and I guess if Leagues Cup happens, you've got some there. But then I think we're at Red Bulls midweek, and there's one more in October. But we have a lot fewer of these. This past stretch of May where we had 9 matches in 4.5 weeks. We don't really have stretches like that moving forward. So there's a chance, and we're not trying to catch up a bunch of matches like LAFC is. We have some time to go rebuild and focus on each match. And this is a team that some of the stats that we've looked at, they can do really well against top of the table teams, and they can blow it against bottom of the table teams. So you can get 3 points out of every single match. And so I come in there with an expectation that we can win every match and then we can lose every match. That's kind of a terrifying approach to life, but hey, right now, what do we have to do? We got to get 25 points in the next 17 matches, and I think that this side is capable of doing that. And if they're not capable of doing that, then okay, go seek some changes, but give them another 17 matches.
Yeah, and I mean, I know I'm still a little salty about the CCL thing, not least of all because I had a great rendition of a little red Corvette called Beating Violette ready to go that I never got to use. And you're welcome, listeners. So Violette did you all a favor that you didn't have to hear that.
I mean, Honky Honk is better than that, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, Honky Honk's pretty solid.
Honky Honk is great.
And I mean, we kind of flamed out in the Open Cup, but I mean, Leagues Cup is a trophy. Charles, if we kind of show out pretty well there, are you willing to hang on to Wolff?
I mean, the state of execution, sure, if it goes really well. I'm very interested to see how much not just Austin puts into Leagues Cup, and how much all the other teams do. Mm-hmm. The Mexican season won't be. I don't think we'll have started by then.
No, they are starting. The Apertura starts the last weekend in June.
Okay, so they will actually be going then, and so I'm interested to see kind of how seriously everybody takes it. I mean, competing for these silverware is important, especially for a club that doesn't have any. So assuming that it goes on and Austin goes on a pretty significant run, i.e., at least the semifinals, then yeah, I would agree that he would get more time.
Okay. I guess I'm going to turn this back around on you, and this is kind of the biggest question we've had, Charles. And I'm going to kind of point out a couple of people asked basically the same thing. Our good friend Phil West at the striker and my fellow St. Louis enthusiast, the Chuck. I'm going to read his because it's a little more in depth and I think kind of gets to the root of the question a little better. But who's the replacement? And I mean, we kind of said Davy Arnaud short term, but let's say he kind of does mid or doesn't prove himself. Who do you replace him with? And do we want to get into that trend of just kind of Chelsea firing coaches left and right?
Well, I don't see us ever being the Chelsea level of firing coaches, which is like the very far end of the bell curve on firing coaches often. At the same time,
it's off the bell
Chelsea,
curve. Let's be serious.
at the same time, Chelsea has gone to a Champions League final that they lost on penalties with an interim manager and won a Champions League title with an interim manager. So you can't say that their strategy hasn't worked.
Chelsea also has a heck of a lot more money than we do.
Yes, this is where the comparisons break down, especially talking about any like Premier League or like Bundesliga teams, is that the money is just very different and the openness of the rosters.
Yep.
I think short term, Davy Arnaud is clearly the guy. He's the guy who, when Josh had COVID last year, took over the reins, and anytime Josh seems to be unavailable, he's the obvious pick. I think having an interim manager until you make bigger front office decisions is a good idea. As far as actual names, I'm not sure. As much as I would love somebody like Almeida to like come in and play chaos ball, I don't foresee us doing that. I think my biggest thing is I would just like to get somebody outside of the U.S. coaching tree, and somebody who's not a like Berhalter disciple, somebody who gets us kind of out of that like drama-filled realm of ex-players that really haven't led to that much success besides outside of Cherundolo.
But but I'll push back on you a little bit. Like, if you get to a point, I also want a coach who has experience winning in MLS. And like that list, like there's a lot of foreign coaches that have come to this league and have failed and have succeeded elsewhere. And like a lot of these American coaches, I mean, as much as we don't like Greg Berhalter on different things, Greg Berhalter has won an MLS Cup. Caleb Porter has won an MLS Cup. Like Bob Bradley has won some MLS Cups. Bruce Arena has won some MLS Cups. Greg Van, like you start going through these lists here, like it's an intro. Like yes, it's like oh god, do we want to go? But like they've won in the league, and yes, I mean Tata Martino is technically available. I assume he will be signed as the new Inter Miami manager in the next week or so.
Yeah,
but like there are not.
Okay, done.
Yeah.
Is it officially done?
I don't think so.
I thought it was done.
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen the press conference.
If it's not done, it's constructive.
Yeah. So like, yes, there's, but he's. I mean, outside of him, like the, I guess, Ronny Dahlia, who was the manager when NYCFC won. Was he back in? He's what, Norway now?
That sounds right to me.
Yeah, I think he went back to Europe. But like, there's a certain point of like, okay, yes, maybe there are foreign managers out there, but if you're going to bring in someone who is outside the U.S. cabal, you need someone who is really, really, really good as a sporting director who understands the absurdities of this league. Or the other option is that Messi somehow breaks all of the rules of MLS and we just somehow have a new CBA negotiated overnight, which I would have said was 0 possibility last week. This week is like a 10% possibility.
I mean, the rules are made up and the points don't matter, so we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, here's the thing is I think for me, it's more that like, because of what we've seen with U.S. soccer, both in terms of the drama and the interconnectedness, I'd like to see us try to get out of that. Mm-hmm. I agree that we need a strong sporting director to understand the league better, especially somebody like Claudio, who was able to pick Stuber out of obscurity, who's one of the better keepers in the league. Exactly. I mean, the counterpoint to that is the entire expansion draft.
I guess Stuber and Diego make up for a lot.
I'm glad you guys are both being fair with each other.
Yes, exactly. And that's the thing is that I think one of the toughest things to evaluate about coaches is looking at how much influence they have, because 90% of coaching we don't see. We see, what happens on the field in terms of tactics and strategy and lineups and substitutions, but 90% of coaching is really about managing the players and the personalities and a staff, and we don't get to see that stuff. So that's why it's so difficult to find a coach or to pick out coach names, is that a lot of the job is behind the scenes.
Yeah, and I mean, kind of speaking of that, I'm going to shoehorn this in with a listener question from David Flores, Seth.
Yeah.
How much blame goes on the coach versus the sporting director? I think we kind of did a little bit of that, but if you want to expand on that, that would be great. And if there's a coaching change, and I think this is a big continuity point, how does it affect the academy and FSCTO? Because I think a lot of the WolffOut crowd says, well, just put in Arnaud, and he's kind of plug and play for now. There's no disruption there. But how do you see that unfolding?
I mean, we have no idea. I mean, Davey Arnaud's never been a head coach of anything, I think. He's been an assistant for multiple teams in the league. But, like, we don't know if he would continue that. Like, I think there's a lot more unknowns there than a lot of other people are willing to readily admit.
Yeah, he was an interim for a little bit, right?
Give me 1 second. I'm pulling it up there. But I believe that he's never been a head coach.
Yeah, full head coach with, like, you know.
Yeah, he was an interim with the Dynamo for a few games, yes.
Okay, yeah. So he's been sort of head coach, in theory, right?
Yeah, but I mean, he went back to he hasn't really done that much on this side of it. Like, yeah, I mean, he's been an assistant for a couple of teams in the league. I mean, he might be the right person. He might be the the Lou Gehrig coming up here as being the next star, and like he could change the direction of this franchise. Like, completely possible. I'm not against him getting a shot here, but it's a question: has Wolff fully blown his opportunity yet? And I'm just not quite there.
Interesting choice with Lou Gehrig. Just going to point that out. But Charles, how do you feel about this? So, like, let's say, they rip up the blueprint and Wolff and Arnaud are gone at the end of the year. Do you have to hire a sporting director that kind of fits this, total football, possession-based, whatever you want to call it, model? Or do you let the sporting director flat out decide from the get-go?
Personally, I would let the sporting director decide from the get-go.
Okay.
Not the least of which that, when you look at Austin's record with possession, they're better when they don't have it. And so I'm not sure that the style that we're trying to play and the roster we currently have really vibe in that way. And so I'd like to see a sporting director who kind of is able to make those decisions and to really put an imprint on the team.
Okay. Seth, how much do you think like hiring Wolff before hiring a sporting director factors into kind of how people view the roster build?
I mean, we didn't sign any. I would have to be double checked on this. My understanding is even Rodney Redis was signed after Claudio Reyna had started.
I think you're correct.
So it's like, I think some of that, like, in retrospect, should have, well, hopefully someone who's a better human being than Claudio Reyna, should have they have been hired a sporting director first? Of course. But, like, we don't live in that world. We live in the world where Anthony Precourt hired Josh Wolff nearly 2 years before we kicked our first ball.
What I mean, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. And it's not ideal, but like I don't think like this roster where it is right now, for good or bad, is mostly a reflection on Claudio Reyna. And so much of being a sporting director is being able to plan 12 to 18 months ahead of time. So like my understanding is like one of the main things that Claudio was planning for upon his departure is who's replacing Alex Ring at the end of this year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it's a question of how are those transitions working? So, like, I mean, right now, the roster build outside of the contracts that have been signed since he left are really, like, those are the only things that we can judge on that are not really Claudio Reyna at this point.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. And I mean, I don't really know. Charles, how do you respond to the argument that I see from a lot of the WolffIn folks? Hey, we don't have a sporting director. Josh Wolff is our coach. We can't fire Josh Wolff until we have a sporting director. Specifically because of what Seth said, where we fucked it up the first time, I guess is kind of how I'm trying to phrase this.
I mean, I think that kind of goes back to some extent, I think that's kind of a disingenuous proposition. Because if we're retaining Wolff as coach through the end of the year just for the sake of doing it, I understand wanting to do that under the idea that it being continuity. But that should also have the expectation that if we hire a new sporting director that doesn't want him, he's gone. And if he seemingly has won this power struggle of staying on, and not only staying on as coach, but also increasing his job title and increasing his power in the organization, I feel like that would prevent a sporting director from being, one, potentially hired, because it might not be a new person. Anthony Precourt might decide that what's currently going on is working behind the scenes. He can make that judgment. He's the owner. That's his right. And so leaving those powers in the front office and at the club would inherently hinder whoever the new hire is.
Seth, how do you respond to that?
I mean, we were just in this chicken and egg cycle here at this point.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Like, it is, okay. Like, or you get rid of, but like, you also don't want to, then in the weird way, you don't want to be getting rid of both of them. But that's what the U.S. men's soccer team is doing. Wait a minute, we're entering a Nations League on Thursday, and we're entering a Gold Cup with a interim coach, and at least we have a sporting director now.
No, we have an interim coach.
Yeah, we have an interim coach. We do. I believe our full-time sporting director is started now.
Yep.
I think he has. The guy from Southampton. But there's, like it took them months and months to get that on the way. But like, admittedly, they don't play games every week, so that it's not as urgent as this is. And I hope that there's really good planning coming up with lists for both of these roles and having because like an MLS offseason is not long. Like, you need to have a sporting director pretty much in place the second you're out of the playoffs. Or if you win the title, then don't worry about it. But it's because like last year we had a long offseason because of the World Cup. Like this year, like, okay, even if we don't make the playoffs, it's from October 21st to February. So like that would be 4 months there. But like if we make a decent playoff run, like you could easily be at Thanksgiving. Or later than that. I mean, I don't think MLS Cup is until the second week of December this year.
Yeah, but
then like your window, like, so I really hope that no matter what is happening right now, that there are really good lists coming up for sporting directors, and then really good lists of coaches that are coming up there for a sporting director to choose from, or the sporting director in their potential interview is like, who are you going to hire as a manager if it's not going to be Josh Wolff?
Yeah, and I guess that's the question I was about to ask you. You sort of preempted it, but, we talk about Claudio and Josh, and especially in the Zardes thing, a lot of people try to pin that on, Josh or the post-Claudio front office, but I think that was in the works ahead of time. Like we talked about, it's 12 to 18 months ahead of time. What the fuck is the front office waiting for? Why haven't we heard a name, or they said something like, well, we're going to narrow our search and try to get it figured out by the off season? Like, is there any visibility, or do you think there should be visibility on how this is going?
Well, right now we have the three of us have probably asked more questions than the combined Austin FC press corps has about this.
Ooh, sick burn.
But like,
take that, Phil West.
Ha! Just kidding, Phil. We love you. Please stop rooting for us.
Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, they are doing their jobs, but it's also like they're getting to a point of. I mean, Adrian made it this point on Moon Tower a couple weeks ago. It's like this is not like where if every match that Frank Lampard lost when he was managing Chelsea or Everton, he's on the front page of it or the back page of a paper. Like, Austin FC losing is a novelty in the Statesman that no one reads, and you should be on solidarity with the Statesman reporters who are on strike and underpaid by the corporate overlords at Connect. But there's it's going through those worlds there. It's like, where is the pressure here if it's not coming from fans? And yes, like there's Twitter, and I think Coach Wolff and others in Precourt reads Twitter and goes through other things, but like Twitter's only so much. Like, if fans are really displeasured, like they're going to have to show it at the stadium for there to actually be some pressure involved in this.
Yeah, Charles, I think you guys were followed and then unfollowed by Precourt pretty quickly.
Well, to be fair to Anthony Precourt, he followed us. 2 days later, we posted about the season ticket prices and called him greedy, and he unfollowed us. I feel as though that was probably related in some way.
Or like,
we'll never
I'm pretty sure Anthony Precourt keeps his followers at 512 and probably has a list of like 50 accounts that he will occasionally follow to let them know that he's really reading more than 512 accounts. So he's still reading the stuff.
What?
Yeah, you didn't know that? I don't even have a Twitter account, and I knew that.
That is wild to hear.
Yeah, see, he uses Twitter. He only follows 512 accounts. You can look this up. I promise you it's true.
I'm going to pull it back here, and we're going to ask a question from a fellow Austin Media Corps member, and it applies to Anthony Precourt, it applies to Josh Wolff, it applies to me, it applies to Charles, it applies to Seth. Jeremiah Bentley of the Moon Tower Soccer Podcast asks us, why is everyone so sure of their position, and why do people overreact to even mild criticism from people on the other side? Charles, you want to take the first whack at that?
I think it comes from Austin fans having to build a tough internet skin dealing with Columbus fans. I think there's also just a lot of people who want to be right all the time about soccer and feel as though any kind of slight or any kind of just like disagreement is like, oh, they think I'm dumb. They think I don't know what I'm talking about. Ultimately, none of us really know what the right answer is. We have thoughts, we have opinions. We need to treat them as thoughts and opinions, keep them as, talking about the stats and what we see and what happens, and not doing things like calling other fans bums or babies or losers and things like that.
Okay, but what if they are bums, babies, and losers?
If an actual baby wants to be WolffIn and can articulate that, more power to that baby. I would like to meet that baby actually.
Okay, I'll have to check in with Logan Avocado's infant to see their position. Seth, any response to Jeremiah?
I think if you've gotten through 57 minutes of this podcast, you've noticed that there's been a tremendous amount of nuance among the three of us in discussing this. This is not a black or white issue as much as it be in or out. I think it's also that certain people take ridiculous personas on the internet, and that you shouldn't necessarily take everything seriously and literally that people are saying. People's emotions get really fired up about these things, and people feel like they need to have their opinions heard. And I'll be the first to recognize that my opinions change over time. There's areas of gray, there's areas of nuance. And that's also part of being a consumer of this game. When people are getting to a point where they are as loyal and as things as this, that they sometimes lose sense of being and forget that this is a game at the end of the day. This is the distraction from the shittiness of the rest of the world. This is supposed to be something that's enjoyable.
I'm gonna have to do this again. It's supposed to be some fucking fun. Yeah, and I think my answer to this is, especially online, people take criticism of an argument or a position as a personal attack significantly more than they should. And that's tied into a lot of things, but it seems exacerbated in kind of the Twitter sphere. And especially, like you said, there's a lot of nuance in this discussion, but, everybody's trying to get a 140 character hot take in, right? There's no room for nuance. And I think the death of nuance is not to wax poetical about larger issues in our society. I think that's causing a lot of the constant at our throat type of shit. Because really what this should be is a soft discussion about hey, is Josh Wolff doing his job adequately? If Josh Wolff isn't, is whatever the alternative is better than the null hypothesis of keeping Josh Wolff on, right? That's what this discussion should be. It should be very, quite frankly, fucking boring. But it's,
yes.
People just screaming at each other nonstop. And I think it's a good question, Charles.
I think there's also, in Austin FC fan culture, there's a lot of people who have podcasts and blogs and have a lot of very strong opinions. And we've seen an influx of that this year. And I think some of the WolffOut, WolffIn discussion and adversarial nature of it is because we have such a thriving fan culture and so many people who have strong opinions and a culture who's probably a little too online. We're on Twitter a little too much, myself included.
Yeah.
That does result in these things seemingly losing their nuance and, picking sides when ultimately all of us need to get on the same side, which is that Wolff needs to wear Verde shirts more.
Yeah, Wolff needs to wear Verde shirts more, and maybe I'll take some Prozac and just chill out a little bit. But
yes, also that.
Yeah.
Yeah, at a certain point, the world will not burn down if we miss the playoffs. Will we be disappointed? Sure. Will we be unhappy? Yeah. But it's gonna be okay, people.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the world isn't going to end. And part of the reason I started this and I wanted to do it as like a post game thing was I wanted to talk tactics. And so when we started doing the five at the back, I was like, holy shit, we did something different. And like, we can actually talk about something new and like how the ball's moving and how we're lining up and things like that. And then like it all just sort of died and we do the same thing every game and we're not allowed to counterattack. And I'm not going to get into it because we've done it 1,000 times. But I think some of the lack of change, we kind of do the same robotic bullshit over and over, is getting a lot of the WolffOut people frustrated. But I want to move on to just go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, like, I do wonder how fans would look at this differently if this was a higher energy, more swashbuckling team where instead of having these kind of dull, 1-0, 2-0 losses or 2-1 losses, and instead every match was a like 4-3 where it was a little more entertaining and a little more felt like we were going to score. Yeah. So I wonder aesthetically if that would make a difference, but I don't know unless we do like some kind of poll.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the bill of sale I was given on MLS, was like, it's this crazy left and right, back and forth, like every game's, 5-4 type of thing. And like, I think you're right. If we were scoring goals and like still losing the same number of games, people would be a little more forgiving. But like a lot of the time watching a game for us is fucking boring. And that's really kind of the issue, right? Like, this is an entertainment business. If you're bored, you're not putting out, like, not to be like uber capitalist about it, like you're not putting out a good product and people don't want to buy that product as much. Seth, you want to chime in here?
Yeah, I mean, I think you get to a point like three of us have watched enough soccer to know that we have seen 0-0 matches that have been on the edge of our seat, and also some 3-2 matches that you're like, oh, that was pretty dull at the end of the day, even though there were some goals in it. Scoring is not the only way to make a match exciting, but it is definitely, to the casual fan here, is definitely the fastest way to do it. But like at a certain point, like I want to have a solid defense as well. I want to have. Yeah, you don't necessarily. You can have some incredible saves. You can do this, but like at a certain point, like our problems are on both ends of the ball right now, and that's primarily a function of players here. Like it is a problem that Stuver has faced the most shots in the league on a match per game adjusted basis. It is a problem that our XG is lower than last year. Like these things are real here, and we have to figure out how to address that.
But Seth, I only want gratification if it's instant.
Yeah, well, you know what? This is called the Suffering from Joy podcast, and there's going to have to be some suffering along the way.
Yeah. I think we've done our suffering for the year. Hopefully we can get to some joy. I did want to ask, Charles, what would it take to make you want to retain Wolff or to switch to WolffIn?
One, I think the team playing better. I think more honesty and more accountability on his part would be nice. But ultimately, like, this is still, as much as we just got done talking about entertainment, like, this is still a results-driven thing. Austin are in 12th. Like, you want the team to do better. And if the team does better under Wolff, that'd be great. I just am not in the belief that that's going to happen.
But But to our ownership group, and obviously we can't really answer this, is it more important to make the playoffs or is it more important to have fake sellouts of every game?
Well, like you said, depends who you ask.
Like it is because like from a commercial point of view, like right now, the biggest statement that can be made, and I'll be curious if we start getting data on this because my first season ticket payment is due in about 17 days, and I hope to Phil West, to Jeremiah, to other people in the media who are listening to this, who are asking this, like I want to know in early July, what's that renewal rate? If that renewal rate is below 95%, that is the first time of being like, okay, maybe there's some real pressure here. And yes, there is a wait list, but like a lot of that wait list is fake. Like Portland had a wait list that was just this long, and a few owner scandals and a few other things, and the wait list, and you start charging more for tickets, and the wait list gets real thin real quickly.
Yeah. I think that's the follow up to that is what the wait list looks like at this time next year because they love to brag about it. And so I'm hoping that we get a good answer on what the renewal rate is. I think that if we don't hear about it, if the club doesn't talk about it, it's probably not good.
Yeah. No answer is probably an answer in and of itself. Let's turn that around on you, Seth, though. What would it take for you to kick Josh Wolff out to the curb?
Right now, I mean, if we have in the short term, if we lose both the next two games by multiple goals, I'm okay with going to Davey, which is like, I don't like it, but like, I would get it. The anger would be so freaking palpable. We've never even drawn Houston at home. I mean, and Dallas isn't going to have Jesus Ferreira in that match. Like, I could see losing one of those matches, but losing two of those matches back to back would just be brutal for this fan base. But I think overall, the season is going to be a locker room revolt or elimination day from being eligible for the playoffs.
Okay. Yeah, and I think to sate the WolffOut hunger a little bit, we're going to need 4 points at least not this week, but during Copa Tejas week. I don't think we can lose either of those games at home.
Yeah, but let's say if we get 2 points out of 2 draws, I think it still probably is at the same level it is now, if not slightly higher.
Yeah, and I guess it depends how we get those draws too, right?
Yep. Yeah, if it's an amazing 9-man performance to hold on to a draw or something, yeah, it's a little different.
Yeah, or like, we score this like amazing goal to tie it up at the last second. Everybody has great vibes coming out of Saturday, right? Like, it's a very different feeling than like how we lost the game in Houston.
Yep.
Which was very dejecting. And I don't know if it was worse than Kansas City, but it was pretty damn depressing. A lot of suffering.
I'm of the belief if you get beat by just thoroughly as we did in Kansas City, like that's more depressing. Like, yeah, you might curse louder about losing on a stoppage time goal, but like, I don't know, it's pretty dejecting to get your ass beat.
Yeah.
Yeah, we ran a poll about after the second goal got scored of, are you going to watch the rest of this match? And for most of the rest of and tracking it through the rest of the match, it was about 2/3, 1/3 in terms of people who had, the 1/3 being people who kind of turned it off.
But you're also judging the most hyper engaged part of the Austin FC fan base at the False Nine, I would assume.
Oh, absolutely. But I think that's also indicative that like 1/3 of those people are turning it off.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of cuts both ways, right? They're both hyper engaged, so they're more active, but like they're also the people who are more likely to watch it through, right?
Yes, in theory.
In theory, right? Okay, well, I don't think we came up with a panacea, but anything either of the two of you faithful and very diligent combatants want to add?
I think we both just want to win the next 2 matches. Like as much as we can be on here, I don't think any of us are, and please correct me if I'm wrong, none of us are rooting for Josh Wolff to fail here. We want this team to succeed. We're just trying to figure out what's the best approach to get this team to succeed.
Yeah, and I mean, if you are rooting for Josh Wolff to fail, fuck off.
Yeah.
I'll put it plain and simple. Like, I don't care if Josh Wolff is the head coach or if he refuses to ever wear Verde again, as long as the team is successful. And I mean, the Verde thing is kind of like a running joke, right? It's a little deeper than that. We've covered it, but
I mean, I don't know what goes on over there, that False Nine compound, but I assume there's like some effigies burned of him wearing black or white or whatever non-Verde colors.
You know what? If
here's the thing, like
go ahead.
We are all about vibes, though, and like we do keep track of these things, and like just as people who are somewhat superstitious, we do believe that there's a little bit to this. Because here's the thing. If he didn't think it was lucky, would he have worn it all through the playoffs?
No, and I think the other thing is we finally got him to wear Verde on Saturday, and he looked rough. Like, he had a very rough week. Like, there was some pressure on him. So I don't know if that was a minor capitulation or what. But only time will tell, I guess. I mean, I would think if he was going to be gone in this international window, he would be gone already, right?
Yeah, he hasn't done enough. He hasn't done enough to be sacked yet. But if the Houston fans on their loud drums are chanting "Fuera Wolff" at the end of this before our fans are, and like doing it in a jeering way, like you're getting sacked in the, I would assume that they have some cleverness, and I don't expect that out of them. But like if that happens from either of the fan bases with their instruments in the next 2 weeks, I don't think I'm ready for those takes.
No, and I mean, maybe we'll get some. Go ahead.
I'm just saying, like, if he's not going to get fired after losing 4-1 before an 11-day break, his job is clearly safe.
Yeah. And I think tied into kind of what I was saying about the getting 4 points, we mentioned like an outward fan revolt causing maybe a Wolf sacking. I think that's what would cause it, was kind of my thinking. Because, I mean, people don't like losing, but, like, you know, getting smacked by Kansas City probably means more to me than, you know, most people. Getting smacked by Houston and Frisco in a week, that's not going to sit well.
Yeah, I think those matches are, especially being rivalry matches, I refuse to use the word derby, are going to make the fan base just naturally care about them more. And having them back to back, and especially considering that this, you know, without good results next week, Copa Tejas could be finished for our purposes. And then at best, we're just playing spoiler for Dallas or Houston, really would kind of get the fan base more so onto the WolffOut side.
Yeah, so I guess only time will tell. Anything else either you want to say as closing statements?
They've heard from us enough at this point.
All right, well, hopefully we'll get some good results, and we'll string some wins together. We'll play some pretty football, and this will all end up being a silly discussion that we'll all look back on fondly. But as always, thanks for suffering with us.
Thomas here for Austin Jarrett Stroud. It's Diego, for goodness! He has written his name into Austin folklore.
They just won't go away.
Oh, he hits the upright again. That's impossible.
The Bears' season's going to end on a double doink.
Altidore squares it. Dempsey's missed it. Donovan has it. From hope, there is glory.